you could have up to 100 phone calls. I mean, when you look at the activity that's happened, it's not
Wow.
just time. It's like 100 phone calls, 4 tours. Like if you look at the stacks of the activities that went in, it's massive. It's like 2 years. And you had asked me one question early on, like, do they always work with the same salesperson? They do. Like the process is one salesperson, but obviously salespeople move communities, right? So it's like you do have a transition of like, hey, welcome to your new job, Deep. Here you go, 300 new people that you've been talking to for 2 years, right? Like here's the leads, right? Best of luck. So you have a lot of that. So like a lot of like just quick context, bringing them up to speed, right? So the agent is like, hey, this is what I think is going on. These are the big risks, right? In this person moving in, this is how you can help. Next step.
Hello, I'm Deep Dhillon, your host, and today on your AI Injection, we're joined by Samay Kohli, founder and CEO of Budy. Samay holds a BE in mechanical engineering and an MSc in economics from BITS Pilani. At Budy, he's building an AI-powered sales agent that learns from top sales reps to shorten cycles in the sales process and accelerate move-ins for senior living communities. Samay, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Steve. A pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So maybe get us started. Tell us, what did people do without Budy, without your solution, and what's different with Budy? Maybe walk us through a typical scenario.
Sure. So Deep, just to get into context, right? Like, I mean, we hyper focus on senior living. So in senior living as an industry is categorized as the industry where it's essentially age restricted living for seniors. Uh, it can start as low as 55 years plus, which is called active adults, but usually 65 above is where independent living, assisted living, memory care, right? So you have all these apartment buildings, condos, or communities that are built for seniors. We essentially help sell faster, more efficiently, make it easier, both sides, for the salesperson to sell and as well as the senior to have a better experience while that happens. So that's kind of high level context.
The scenario like is somebody's considering either putting themselves or one of their parents into a facility and they're shopping around and you're trying to find them, identify them, and then reach out to them on behalf of a particular facility, something like that.
Industry, yes, but not at all on the front end. We're a B2B business, so we sell to the operators who actually are selling. So a senior would reach out, an operator who actually operate the communities. They have the
Hmm.
salespeople under them. Buddy essentially is an AI agent which works along with them in their CRM to help them do their process better. And let me give a little context on the process because without that, I think we'll not go anywhere. So I think from a process point of view, it is a B2C industry, right? So the salespeople are selling to consumers, individuals. As we get into it, you'll realize that my background's all been B2B so far. So the reason I'm here and we love this industry is we're looking at it very much from a B2B industry, and we think it's a B2B industry because if you think about a sales cycle is typically 18 months to 3 years long in senior living, as well as it's a multi-stakeholder decision making, right? So it's like, as you gave the example, somebody's asking for themselves, their spouse, or is also asking for, their parents. By the way, more likely than not, people are asking for their grandparents. So the research is actually being done by the granddaughter in most cases, right? There is then all the siblings involved, and then there's obviously the senior themselves. So you've got all of these people all involved for take it as a 2 year process, right? And on the flip side, the number of leads that a salesperson manages is like consumers. So they're managing over 300. 300 is kind of the minimum number of active leads that they're managing, right? That's where it's this intersection of B2B, B2C, healthcare, real estate, right? So it's this amongation, which makes the sales process very complex, which is why, we're helping and assisting in that.
Complex, maybe from what angles? Like one is that seems like a long time horizon. And so that's, hey, my parent just fell or my grandparent just fell, and now I'm starting to think about this process. Then maybe they go and tour some places to, okay, now we really have to put them in. So there's like the temporal aspect, but then complex from an information aspect too, because I imagine like quite a bit of questions depending on the type of living facility. If it's assisted living, then there's a lot more deeper healthcare questions maybe being asked. If it's senior living, maybe less so and more on the community side. So are those the sort of two primary angles of complexity that you're looking at, or is
Yeah,
there something else too that you're thinking of?
yeah. I mean, I'm trying to put it in words. I mean, firstly, it's just such an emotional decision, Deep, if you,
Mm,
as I've looked at the industry, right? So it's not like you don't go out to buy, right? You start to explore. It's usually because the events happen. I would say in most sales processes, there is discovery, right? Like what do you want to buy and all of that stuff. But a lot of the sales process, I would say, I would guesstimate that 70% of the sale process is actually figuring out what do I want to buy? Is this the best? Comparing, blah, blah, blah. I'm generalizing, right? In this process, I'll say 70 to 80% of that 2 year cycle to a large degree is denial. You're exploring, but you don't want to buy, right? Like it's like, hey, I'm looking at
right.
this, but I'm just exploring, like
I know this moment is coming. My mom or dad or somebody fell, and we can manage for now, but let's go look. Let's
yeah,
start to
and
pay
some
attention
people
to
will
it.
say, let's go look, but I think I'll need it in 10 to 20 years. Or people will be like, hey, I still drive, right? Like, it's like, okay, like, like most of the people in the communities drive, right? But they're like, they've mentally put it as like, oh, if I can drive, I don't need to move into those places. So
Right.
there's a whole emotional cycle, right? There's the spouse angle. So, by the way, I will say, like a lot of times the spouse is already facing extreme dementia. The husband's in denial. Both of them are exploring. The salesperson, they can see it. It is an extremely human side of like the process. So 70, 80% of the cycle, the actual work of, I call it the T's and C's of like, what's the apartment going to be? What's the facility? You versus pricing, all the stuff we take normally in a sale process that happens in months.
Yeah, a lot of it is just like help me deal with this stage in life that I'm in because you
Yeah.
see it all the time. I mean,
Yeah.
it sounds similar to real estate in some ways where it's not about the house exactly. It's about I've never bought anything so big before. That person is there to like walk you through this, and then you're imagining your life there and all that. Okay, so in the current mode without your product, what does the layout look like? So one of these facilities might have a handful of sales reps working on behalf of a specific facility, or are they working for like a larger corporation? They're not actually physically connected to the place at all. How do they get their leads today? How do they talk to them? If
Sure.
you reach out to a facility, are you talking to the same sales rep, for 6 months, a year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years? Like, walk us through what happens without your product, and then we'll walk
Sure.
through with
We'll
it.
get to. So regular right now for CDeep, every facility has what I'll say is minimum one salesperson, 2 to 3 people, ideally, right? You're looking at facilities anywhere like 100 to 200, like doors or communities, apartments, cottages, whatever is the format of that. So you'll usually have 1 to 3 salespeople. You have the natural organic lead sourcing, which is like, Google searches, ads, somebody land on your page, referrals from existing residents. That's one part, right? There are aggregators. One of the biggest aggregators is a Place for Mom, right? Which is like you search for Place for Mom, they'll do lead sourcing. And then there are intermediaries. Go to this website, they'll have a shadow salesperson, but that person is independent. They'll do. But I'll say this is an in-person tour many times, check out the facility sales. So the actual sale is done by the person in the community, right?
So ultimately, like the person that you think of as the seller is going to physically meet these people and physically
Absolutely.
walk them through the building. So very much
Absolutely.
like a real estate agent or something. It's not
100%.
anonymous. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why it's real estate plus healthcare, right? Like that's the two
Hmm.
intersections of this space.
Got it. And that person is typically comped on commission or something.
It varies a lot, but I would say what I've seen compared to what I know on B2B or enterprise, right? It's a very less percentage of their comp is there because, in some sense, they don't want them to be that salesy, right? Like
Yeah.
you're going to build relationships with current residents. You're physically present in the facility, right? You're
Oh, so why are they building relationships with current residents so that they can gain referrals over time or something, or
Yeah, yeah,
friends, that kind of
referrals,
thing?
ambassador program, right? You continue the relationship. When you move in, most of these communities, it's a month to month. It's not like an annual contract law. There are some models called CRC where you actually buy, but most of this is rental, month to month, not even an annual contract, right?
Yeah.
So the relationship kind of continues, right? Like you sold me, so you are going to see me around. You're going to say hi over dinner, lunch. So they are absolutely, it's not sale and done.
What's their context for talking to the person after they've moved in? Is it just like, hey, we know each other from before, or do they have some kind of other role in the facility?
They don't have a other role, but in any of this, like let's say 100 community motion, you have 3 to 4 people or apartments moving in, moving out every month. Right.
Hmm.
It is a flow, right? Unfortunately, most of the move outs happen because of deaths or somebody
Yeah.
needs to be hospitalized or, like you don't have the level of care, right? But it's a constant in and out motion. So in some sense, people do know, hey, this came in. I thank you so much for that referral. Hey, what's going on in your life? And I'll say one of the biggest sales piece of the entire puzzle is what's called a tour, right? So when
Hmm.
you tour the incoming prospect, right, and you're doing 2 to 3 tours a day, right, at some times, right? So in some sense, you are meeting these people on the corridors, you're interacting, you're making sure the prospect sees how well you're connected in the community. What I've learned is they genuinely care, like everybody from the like people in this, everybody from the salesperson to the chef to the community manager, everybody's not in this industry to make a quick buck or like start their
Yeah.
careers, right? Like they're somehow connected to saying, hey, they want to be around, and it's an amazing environment to be around seniors.
So where do these sellers get stuck and where is AI helping out? So I imagine there's contributions on the AI side for like sourcing leads. There's probably a lot of contributions on the question answering side. Basically, like how do you think about it? Do you think about success as one of these sales reps without the bot can handle 100 apartments, and with the bot can handle 1,000? What's the macro KPI, if you will?
So for us, the macro KPI is conversion rate, right? Like, so at the end of the day, right, like if they're doing 3 move-ins, can they do 4? And okay, that's
Uh-huh.
at the core of it. We
Like per
don't,
month or whatever.
yeah. So it's like conversion rates on existing. So through increase in velocity, usually that's kind of what it comes out to, right? So that's kind of the macro level, right? Like the
Yeah.
little one level deeper than that is because of the number of people, right? Like you have 300 leads, you need to be moving in 3 to 4 in the current month. You end up focusing on the hot 10, right? Or the hot 15 at the maximum, right? Which is like stuff where people are showing signals that they would actually move in the next 3 to 5 months. Those are
Hmm.
what come to the top of your mind. I feel like in some sense, we help the least for those. They're
Uh-huh.
top of mind. Salespeople are on top of them. I think they'll do this. Like I call it as both parties are ready, right? Like the senior wants to be sold and the salesperson wants to sell.
And that's important because a lot of times the salesperson doesn't want to sell because there's no availability. Is that?
No, they don't want to sell because these are very empathetic people. Like they're like, I'm like, hey, I'm not even thinking about it. I've told you I'm absolutely all right. Why the hell are you even following up with me? Right? Like I just
Oh,
am
I see. So it's always the case that they always have capacity to move somebody new in.
most likely. I mean, even you
Yeah.
could do deposits, you could do reserve. Actually, Deep, think of it this way: you are going to have 3 or 4 availabilities every month, right? Like
Hmm.
that's a given. That way, it's not at all like real estate or an apartment building where like I'm sorry, I'm at capacity. They operate good buildings we work with operate in the 85-95% occupancy rate at any time,
Hmm.
but it's just keeping. You can have 3 bad months and that thing can drop down, so you have to keep moving in. But to your question, it's like in enterprise sale, I'll always say is like, hey, hard qualify them. If they don't want to buy, don't talk to them, right? But if you don't talk to them, they're not going to move through the funnel. You have to talk
So
to them.
there's a long nurture
Long nurture.
aspect to the campaign.
Yeah.
Need help building a great chatbot, or perhaps help with computer vision, natural language processing, automated content creation, conversational understanding, time series forecasting, customer behavior analytics? Reach out to us at xionyx.com. That's XYONIX.com. Maybe we can help.
So, okay, so let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about the role of AI. Let me guess. This is always fun for me. Let's see how far off I am. But I'm going to just guess what I think you're doing based on what we talked about. So let's talk about leads first. So you have leads that are coming in. So you have these aggregators. You might have forms being filled out. You might be running ad campaigns and stuff. So I imagine maybe your first point of contact with the AI system is you get raw unqualified leads and maybe you have a conversational element. So you've got a backend LLM, OpenAI, Gemini, whatever. You know maybe some basic information about the person. The bot can kind of talk back and forth across maybe a few different media, maybe email, maybe chat, maybe text, maybe something else. And the point there is to like kind of build a profile on the customer to understand how relevant they are. You start building a database of these folks, and you don't yet have to have a human interact with them until you get some kind of threshold or something. So maybe then there's an analysis component of past message histories. So something is going through and analyzing the results of these conversations of bots going to this person, maybe scoring them on different axes or propensity to buy, stage in the funnel, something like that. You're human then, in between like wandering around the facility and chit-chatting with folks. They log in, they have some kind of portal or something. They check in, they have some kind of stack ranked view of candidates, if you will. And maybe at some point the bot hands over the conversation to them. Whether the bot pretends to be them or pretends to be bot, I'm going to just assume it's maybe a bot at first because people are comfortable with it and it's kind of weird to masquerade. And then at some point they take over the conversation. They can always ask questions. So there's probably a huge question answering component. So you have a corpus about the facility, maybe about general stuff, like how do I actually deal with this stage in life and all these challenges. So that's in your maybe RAG system. And then you have stuff about the facility, particularly program specifically. Maybe you have a bunch of information about, I don't know, like insurances and, all that kind of stuff. And then maybe there's even a question answering component for the seller. So the seller can come in and talk to the system to like understand more. All right, that's my guess. So am I like totally off?
But I was really enjoying.
Okay, good.
But
Awesome.
and I didn't want. I mean, like everything you said are genuinely good ideas in good space that I think
Yeah.
people should come up with, right? And they are coming up in the industry. We have a very different view at it, but I
Yeah.
think your view on the thought of like handling the initial conversation. I would say just one thing I will add this context in. It's completely not a digital sale, right? Like, so in some sense, if you think about it, you do not, you said earlier, like people just like talking to a chat bot and ask stuff. They absolutely don't like, it's like, think of it as like, you have Zillow. Yeah, you want to browse through the picture. Actually, it's worse because in Zillow, at least every second house is a little different and you want to look at the
Yeah.
pictures. In this, it's one community with a sample bedroom and you're going to set up your own place. You're basically getting an empty space and facility. So there's very limited digital research. Digital research is done probably by the grandchild or the child over some weekend, right? Of the
Okay.
senior. You do talk to the person, right? That's kind of first thing, just kind of industry context. The reason why we are probably not doing what you're saying, which all makes sense, right, is
Yeah.
that I'm coming from a way of I ran a very large company. We bought a lot of sales and marketing software. We kept adding more and more. And I was always promised this, like, buy this app and this is going to make the sales process go better, and then go put this on your website. That'll make better. And that I came with a very strong view, me and my co-founder, that, hey, we don't want to build another sales and marketing app. We actually want to be the layer, the connecting glue, if you may, between all of these. And I would say I don't like using like AI jargons like AI agent because they could mean 1,000 things, but genuinely think of it as like a small teammate or somebody you hire who's not like another app, like genuinely adds in the process and say, hey, if you had to coach my salespeople, how would you coach them? If you had to pick which leads should they focus more on, or I have a marketing automation software, it leads campaigns. We've got campaigns set up. Who should we pick out of the current ones and add them to one campaign? Or, let's say the campaign is an expensive campaign, right? Like it's going to cost me $200 to get them to go have lunch at this place or dinner at this place. Who should I pick to go assign? So it's one layer of abstraction above, right? But I'll go and explain probably in the same way you laid it out, right? So by the way, for us, the idea is you could have a chatbot, you could have an AI-enabled chatbot, you could have a traditional NL one, you could have a very dumb chatbot, doesn't matter. If you have a chatbot,
You being the seller,
the company, the operator might have another
operator. Okay.
existing app. You could adopt another app, right? If you
Okay.
like look at it, you should have a CRM, right? Like where we can read, you should have a marketing automation. So you have those ingredients in whichever flavor. We use AI for two sides of this business, right? One is deep that we actually use LLMs to do the integrations in. So we don't have connectors with these. One, we actually feed it. Here's the API documentation. This is what you need to extract from here. Why don't you write a connector, right? So that
Connector to what though? What are we
connected to whatever, it could be your CRM, could be your chatbot, could be your
for the facility. So this is
or the operator. So it's like first level is like I'll ask you as a operator, I'll be like, I literally the power discovery calls are, I'll ask you as a VP of sales saying, hey, tell me if you had to add a sales coach inside to help your sellers sell more, accelerate, right? What would you do? They'll be like, oh, I just do this, right? And we'll be like, okay, sounds good. We'll tell the agent to do this. Now, tell is like fancy way to say it, but it's kind of two parts. One, we will say it prompted to say, hey, this is kind of the intent of the plan. Want to go access these systems. Here's their website documentation. Can you write the code, right? So we'll write the workflow code of how you pull in all the information, right? That's one
information about the facility and the apartment.
facility, apartment, prospects, whatever, all the digital information you'll need
Yeah.
access to as a agent, right? That's one. And the second part of it is now where we actually interact with the seller is inside their CRM. So it's like you logged in a call. The minute you logged in the call, the agent would like basically get triggered. A workflow will get triggered. It'll analyze. It'll be like, okay, sounds good. This is what I think the next best step should be. Or, for example, you haven't reached out to this person in 2 weeks, right? Like, hey, we won't say as per the corporate guidelines, but like whatever, we'll have some guidelines that corporate said, hey, leads in this stage should be at least have some activity followed up, blah, blah, blah. It'll just ping in the front end inside the CRM. It'll add another activity note saying, hey, it's been 2 weeks since we pinged Deep. Do you want to give him a call or do you want to drop a message? Why don't you do that?
It's like a sales coach for the seller.
Yeah, that's one way to.
So but there's no contact with the buyer.
No. It's a different side of it. It's more the B2B side of it than the consumer side of it.
Yeah. So you're really trying to help that seller in all the context of the sale be a better seller.
Yep.
And figure out who to talk to now. And that way it's still a people first kind of interaction between the seller and the buyer, and there's no digital mediation there.
No, think of it as like our pitch or our tagline is make all your sellers your best sellers, right? Like we basically pick the best practices that your good sellers do, and then we'll just make all your sellers look superhuman. They'll remember exactly who your son is, what your dog's name is, when was the last time where you vacationed. They'll be like, that's what really works in this industry, right? Like, do you genuinely care about that senior's life? And what happens deep is that if you go back to original context, sellers do really well, good or bad. I mean, if you have a job, you're doing well in the top 10 or 15 leads, right? Like you're closing them, you're on top of them, right? It's the part where you can get the best return on investment is after the top 15, right? Like, so the people who are not going to buy in the next 4-5 months, what can you do to accelerate them faster, so that your top 15 list becomes top 30, top 40, because these are people who want to move in the next 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, or what can you do to get into their top of their mind? Because maybe they're looking at 10 facilities.
Yeah,
and so and they're going to think of you because you remembered all kinds of details about their situation, and whenever they talk to you, they just feel better or something like that.
Yeah, you listen. It's called in the industry, it's called a trust breakthrough, right? So you've had a trust breakthrough, and that's essentially what the agent helps you do. And the way we've been going about Deep is like literally think of it as a seller, you join one of these communities, I'll give you the corporate guidelines of like, hey, do this. It's 100 things I'll tell you to do. Frankly, 20% of that stuff, you'll do it hands down. You love it. It's, like, because you do it, you see reaction. A lot of the 80% is like, hey, make sure you follow up once a week or twice. Don't let them go cold. That stuff where, like, you don't like doing it. There's a emotion. There's a bandwidth, but there's also
feel weird when, anyone who's sold, myself included, you feel like you're
intruding.
You're like, it's the equivalent of like, I'm opening the door and looking in their apartment, like, hi, do you want to hear about what,
Yeah. So, and it's for that is where the procrastination gets removed, right? Like that's what you kind of like help the agent, like helps you saying, hey, you don't need to be intrusive. You just need to be somebody nice. Because the worst follow-up is, hey, I'm just following up. Right? Like that's like the
Oh,
worst follow-up. How did that add value? Right. So that's essentially the place
I
where
was just thinking about you and this question you asked a couple months ago, and here's some information.
imagine the smallest of things. I mean, like you and I have experienced AI. We can use ChatGPT, LLMs. We know how to. So for a lot
Yeah.
of this stuff, it's like, yeah, this is straightforward, but it's a lot about like, how do you make it robust and intelligent enough to be helpful, not hallucinate? That's one side of the
Hmm.
tech challenge. But most of the stuff is like, how do you meet them in the moment at the right time, right? Like somebody just said, hey, I'm going to Nice on a vacation with my family. Can you do the follow up in 4 weeks where you ask about like, hey, how was that? Hey, you
How was the
remember Nice
trip?
and how, and actually say, hey, did you end up going to that monument? Like, like you just say
Hmm.
that so that the person's like, oh, like you'll remember. I'll give you, this is by the stuff we've learned that some of the best sellers do. Real example. This lady was on the phone and she was like talking to this person, but on the side, she's like, hey, I'm sorry. Martha was the sales lady's name. She's like, Martha, I'm really sorry. I'm talking to this dealer and he just doesn't understand. Like, he's like, got my car there for 2 weeks. Something's going on with her car, right? And, in chatting, Martha just picks up and she's like, okay, so, like, what's the problem? What's happening? Which one? Is this the dealership around the corner? What are you doing? Right? Like very little stuff. Keeps the phone down, calls the dealership up, right? And
Oh, wow.
says, hey, tell me what's going on, right? Like I know she's an old lady. She might not be understanding. Explain. I mean, I'm a friend of hers. Like, just tell me what's going on. And, like the person breaks it up as like, this is what the real problem is, right?
Yeah.
Martha calls up and says, hey, by the way, I just happened to I called the dealer up. I think this is blah, blah, blah. And, like, I think this is what's going on. You should be able to do this, right? So that one call, like, what do you think happened to that? That lady moved into Martha's community, right? Like, it's
Yeah, because they also know that this seller is wandering the halls and hanging out with her or whatever. So let me ask you this. So it sounds like the bot is on the phone call and has
transcripts,
access to the
post,
call and
transcripts, post call.
transcripts. Yeah. And then can incorporate that into a set of action items that the seller has as options and maybe stack ranks them, something like that.
Yeah. These are three possible ideas you could do to follow
Hmm.
this up.
And then also from those transcripts, the bot can provide feedback to the seller on things they can improve on.
Yeah, that's another
Um,
different workflow, but yes. And
yeah.
also, I'll just add in the people like I didn't personally appreciate this side. A average deal, like something which is close to closing, you could have up to 100 phone calls. I mean, when you look at the activity that's happened, it's not
Wow.
just time. It's like 100 phone calls, 4 tours. Like if you look at the stacks of the activities that went in, it's massive. It's like 2 years. And you had asked me one question early on, like, do they always work with the same salesperson? They do, like the process is one salesperson, but obviously salespeople move communities, right? So it's like you do have a transition of like, hey, welcome to your new job, Deep. Here you go, 300 new people that you've been talking to for 2 years, right? Like here's the leads, right? Best of luck. So you have a lot of that. So like a lot of like just quick context, bringing them up to speed, right? So the agent is like, hey, this is what I think is going on. These are the big risks, right? In this person moving in, this is how you can help. Next step.
And then they introduce them or something like that too. And
Yeah, I mean that the salesperson would do themselves, right? Like
Mhm.
they'll
Oh yeah,
pick the
right.
leads,
Okay.
right? But the agent would basically get them to. I mean, people right now do it without the agent. You are spending about an hour skimming through all the transcripts, all the calls, message. Oh, that happened. Oh, I generally have idea what's going on. Okay, let me give a.
So like when we started the conversation, you sort of mentioned that there was like all of these questions that a buyer might have here, about putting their loved one or themselves into a facility. How are they asking those questions? Is it always like human to human? I mean, that seems like there's a role for like the digital follow-up. Like, hey, if you have any questions, you can start here, but if you ever get stuck, just talk to me, or is it always human to human?
No, there's a lot of digital stuff. It's a follow-up digital format, but it's not like, you're not going to do your research through that. That's what I meant, right? So for example, we just talked, right? Earlier, what would happen is the human would go in the system and say, hey, I think I should send these 2 questionnaires to them, or I should send them this resource to go through. There'll be automated like, hey, thank you, it was nice chatting to you. Or, like there'll be video is starting to become big in the industry, video message. So you have pre-recorded. So obviously the senior doesn't know that these are repeated, like you use the same video for 10 people, but it's a video from the salesperson right after that saying, hey, post our call, I was just thinking I should tell you a little bit about, I didn't do a good job explaining the different modes of AL, blah, 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 blah. That exists, that's there. Where the agent comes into ways like it can actually pick what is the best resource to send forward, right? Like, hey, or this person is in discovery stage. I found on our website, because the website communities have their own special websites, right?
Yeah.
And a community's website keeps updating. So like what resources are available or not. Literally salespeople go in and check their website before sending a link of like, hey, this thing still exists on our website and the central marketing team didn't update our website and remove that resource from there. So the agent just literally browses the community's website and is like, hey, you should send these 2 links to them to research later. It'll help them get meta. So don't get me wrong, there is digital, but it's a human driven sales process. It's not digital research.
Perhaps you're not sure whether AI can really transform your business. Maybe you don't know what it means to inject AI into your organization. Maybe you need some help actually building models. Check us out at xionyx.com. That's XYONIX.com. Maybe we can help.
So your platform and tool, you're thinking of it as a senior living selling facilitator, or are you thinking like, I am going to start out first with senior living, and then later on I might move into another domain or 2 or 3 where there is this natural bias towards a human heavy centered selling process?
I like putting it as like, you need to be 3-digit plus million before you do another industry. So there's time to go. I spent the last 13 years in my last company being one industry in supply chain. So the plan's the same here. Stay super focused. It's a nice industry. Will I, like never say never, like will I go add another industry down the road? Sure. But it's not like we're not trying to build a horizontal play, right? We are trying to go deeper and deeper into the application and make sure that, like the sellers are here. There's lots of tech advantages to, like you can start training small models, you can start building the acronyms, there's a lot of application knowledge that helps be special in the industry. So our plans to be more specialized in the industry than a horizontal player.
Yeah, why don't we talk a little bit about, so I think I get the sales assist mechanisms that you're sort of describing, like what's the next action to do, and at what point in time, analysis of the conversation between the buyer and the seller, maybe coaching suggestions, etc. But it seems like there's an opportunity to build maybe either one or some helpful tooling that the seller can like put in front of the buyer, like answering questions about X, Y, or Z topic, as opposed to the seller as a human always fronting that conversation.
That makes sense.
Are you thinking about that? If so, like, is it question answering? Is it something else?
Yeah, Deep, the one thing, so I'll answer your question, but I'll give a caveat out in it, right? So firstly, I absolutely think there's opportunities to digitize more stuff. And as long as the buyer, the real buyer, the senior, or their families are accepting adoption, like, you should do all of that stuff. And I think we'll continue to basically accelerate adoption of digital tools in the industry. We might not necessarily make them ourselves, right? Like that's kind of how we look at it. Because, for example, one of the biggest things we've started focusing on as our next thing on adding is, so, like in senior living, it's very normal. Some discussion happened on the weekend and you just thought about calling the community. So you left a missed call, you called the community. The seller got the lead first thing in the morning, tried calling you back, no answer because you're at a job. Maybe you're the child, right? It follows up 4 or 5 times, no response, right? Marks the lead lost. Now it is lost because you tried calling back and it's genuinely why you lost it, right? But there's no harm in a AI voice bot just calling, it can call 12 times, pre-designated 20 times, right? To try to get the senior on the call and say, hey, Deep from the community was trying to get in touch with you. Can I get something on your calendar? What time's good to talk, right? So re-engage leads digitally, right? I'm very AI hype averse. So we're literally going through tests on okay, what are the AI?
What's the hang up rate? And
what's the hang up rate?
Does it harm the relationship?
How do you not? hallucination is one
No,
thing.
no,
How can you get them a shortly done on, because the job for like the application we are looking at is you have just one job, either get a call booked, right? Or hang up, right? Do not talk, do not sell the product, right? Don't answer questions, because that's not what the communities want. They're like, hey, we don't want to risk right now anybody else mis-selling our product. I don't know if it answers your question, but I think those are like things that we'll keep, like we'll go find the best technology and we'll be like, hey guys, I think this is great. Do you want to like integrate this in? And, Buddy, the AI bot will like feed it all the information. It'll integrate it. It can, it'll be seamless for you. You can simply
Is that where the bias is? Like, is that why I got the methodology so wrong? Is because the bias is heavily towards retaining the relationship with the human by these institutions and like reinforcing the relationship with the human as opposed to having the bot front the relationship and then hand it over when it's ready.
The bias, if I may, it's a good way to look at it. The bias is to not force people to change their behaviors, which I mean by the operator. So like the operator wants to use more digital touch points, go for it. You want to use less digital touch points, do it. The AI agent is agnostic. It's more orchestrating. We want to make sure whatever process you're doing, how do you get the best bang out of buck for that? But our bias is that we don't want to like tell the operators a better way to sell. We want to make them more efficient.
Yeah, no, I was actually speaking more to the operator's bias. Yeah. Is there
There is, and I think in the industry there is
very high a high personal touch business, probably all the way around. But I don't mean bias in a negative way. I just mean like there's a natural sort of relationship, social heavy touch point industry. Like it's very different than selling airline tickets. Like this is, a completely like human to digital relationship. Nobody buys a plane ticket to Boston or wherever based on how great of a conversation. Well, I mean, they did 25, 30 years ago. They did. But not now. That era's gone. And I guess that's like, is that a concern for you that maybe you're pushing so heavy on this relationship assumption? Actually, let's dig on that analogy. So 35 years ago, if I wanted to buy plane tickets, I went into a travel agent. I actually had a relationship with a travel agent. I had a great travel agent, and I didn't have to think about anything. I didn't have to waste all my time like I do now trying to buy tickets. I talked to them. They figured it out. They gave me a call like 3 hours, 4 hours later. They're like, hey, I found you some great tickets with a transfer here and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, great, thanks, boom, end of stuff. So I could imagine somebody in your position 30 years ago thinking like, hey, this is a very relationship heavy business and all this stuff. When in reality, fast forward 30 years, that entire industry got decimated with some minor exceptions. Everything got, usurped with this very digitally centric buying process. I imagine like, is there some element of generationality here, where like millennials are sort of renowned for example, physician hopping? Like they'll just jump onto the web and say, my back hurts, I have this problem. The front door to the healthcare industry is no longer like a long-term relationship with a physician for that demographic. Like, are you concerned about that at all, or?
We're solving for today. As the industry will move, we'll keep solving. That's where, by the way, for us, if you're in touch with your industry and listening to the customers, any of these motions as they change would be changed by the early adopters. And the early adopters are going to come, frankly, with us only to say, hey, this is how it's changing.
I need a little more of this functionality.
Yeah, let's do that.
I don't need my seller to talk at this stage in the selling cycle. Cool. So let's switch gears a little bit. So we've talked about like what you're doing. I think we all have a good understanding of that. But let's talk about the should. And I don't mean this in any kind of confrontational way, but I feel like as a generic critique of the tech industry, we tend to like get into problems and not think of the second order effects of what happens if we're incredibly successful. Are there second order effects if you're like wildly successful, and this AI process is incredibly successful that you think you should think about, or somebody else, in your industry should be thinking about?
The way I look at it is that these things are co-created. How does a market react? How does co-creation work? What routes do products take, right? There are different kind of founders. There are founders I meet all the time where it's like, hey, this is my strategy and this plan of how I will execute it. For me, the kind of founder I am at is like, it's more vision driven on like, hey, this is the general direction I want to head into, and then take a breath and make sure that you're executing really well. I think it's all of our responsibilities, at least my responsibility, to make sure that where I see things which will spoil behaviors, like, for example, I'll give you a real example of in our line, what's the line between guiding a salesperson versus just telling them what to do? Right? Because if you tell them what to do, they'll follow through and they'll execute it, right? And I'm not even talking about the problems with hallucination or what if something's wrong. But you stop the salesperson from thinking what should happen in that deal because they're like, click send, click send, click send. They're doing that. Or frankly, the bot's doing it on their behalf. We're very careful of that because I just feel the salesperson will become inefficient if we robotize the salesperson. The person has to have context of what's going on in this person. They need to know the life of that person. So we have to keep them in the loop as we interact, right? But these are small micro decisions of like, hey, this is what human tendencies are you doing? The number one request that we have is that, hey, why don't you build a chat interface with your AI agent, right? Like, why does it need to go update in the CRM or help?
Yeah.
You know, we don't want to make it as like, this is your 1-800 helpline for the salesperson. You have to do your job. I like to think of it as a human being, but a digital entity, which is there to do my job and help you along. But I'm not your 1-800 helpline because you have to think about what your opportunities are going to be done and where it's going to come. So this is just choices you make.
I think this is a really good example that you're bringing up because it's not unique to your AI problem, right? Like this is one of the problems is if you're successful, you will become better than the humans at what they do. And you will know what to do at any given moment. And your system will know what the right thing to do is. And your system will be able to say things in the right way with the right tone. All you have to do is maybe circumvent the part where the human actually meets them in real life. Maybe you do that online, maybe you circumvent it. Maybe it's not your company, maybe it's your competitor, maybe it's not your industry, maybe it's another industry. But I feel like one of the risks that you're rightly pointing out, and I commend you on detecting it early and kind of optimizing towards it, is I don't know if you've ever watched The Simpsons, but the Homer Simpsonification of the nuclear power plant, regulator. And I think this is a real risk for almost everything we do with AI is that we think the safety valve is putting a human in the loop. But if the human is so zonked out with boredom that they're just sitting here executing stuff, that they're no longer the human we think of today as actually being empowered and enabled. To me, that's actually a fundamental risk. I already see it with young software engineers where they don't know what the hell they're doing a lot of the times because they haven't been writing low-level code. They've just been GPTing everything and co-piloting everything. I don't know what the right thing to do is. I know I started out in the other direction, but I do applaud your anchoring the human and feeding the human first and foremost because I don't think there's really a way around that if we want to build a society where we're still relevant.
No, and I think Deepa, our roles, it's not like in your or my hand and not even in the hands of a few. Our roles will evolve and they've frankly evolved for the last 50 years. They'll continue to evolve for the next 50. I mean, they did evolve much lesser, I think. I mean, what I'm blown away by is like how much our world's evolved in the last 100 versus the last 1,000. I feel like it's evolved
anyone from 1,000 years ago would only think this is all like a magical sort of divine world that we're in. I mean, just
even
crazy.
100 years ago, if you think about 100 years ago, like what was happening to what forget AI. I mean, just communication, transportation, like you can go to another continent. What are you talking about?
In a matter of hours.
In hours, or even like people would it's a year trip, right? Like they don't come back usually when they go to another. I mean, 100
in
years
1925, you jumped on a steamer,
and a month
ship.
there, and
3 weeks later, you're in Europe or something. It was like the time frames. Absolutely.
So, I mean, like coming back to I think the change is inevitable. I genuinely believe that. I think as tech people, what we can do, which is, by the way, serves our purpose and serves the society's purposes, right? Like my last company, I did robots. I mean, it's like it has 25,000 robots deployed right now running live, right? So if
like
you
physical.
Physical, actual robots running physically. When you have 25,000 robots, I actually did a LinkedIn post on this. Everybody would come to me and say like, okay, where's the lights out version? Why are you even wasting time on making these robots that work along with human beings? I just want a dark warehouse. And I'll say I got tempted we're young entrepreneurs in the first couple of years. I got tempted by that and I was like, oh, that vision sounds good. Like, here's my 5-year roadmap. Every year we'll remove humans out of it, right? But when you go to the deeper, that's not what, I mean, if from the practical sense of like this stuff, technology doesn't exist even today to do what was supposed to be done. But even if you remove the tech side of it, you should not fight a market. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, every time you said, can I geek out about like what would a world be where a senior could buy on their own or can tract on there and look at the advantages of that? I can, right? But I just feel like that's not how seniors want to buy today. They want to buy this way. It'll evolve slowly. I just want to be along the ride, accelerating that evolution rather than trying to disrupt it in some sense.
Gotcha. Okay, well, this has been an awesome conversation. Thanks so much for coming on. I'm just going to leave you with one final question that I ask everybody. Let's say you're, wildly successful, 5 years, 10 years out. What's different in the world? What is positive? And maybe like what's negative too? Like how do things look in 5 or 10 years, assuming you're wildly successful?
I think it's a little grandiose than my industry, but I think it's going to be true in ours. But at least in our industry, digital entities or digital employees would be a real thing. It's a person who, has a personality, and everybody else, like we will be having a conversation around deep. So me and like right now we say, so I don't know if you use it, but I sometimes say, hey, me and ChatGPT were having this conversation, which I do a lot of times.
No,
in
my
the
wife
office.
and I, we've just named him. I call him Chadwick. She calls her Claudio, but like, yeah.
So I think that way, I think that in a corporate of saying, this is what this guy did, or this is what like us chatting about digital entities and human entities in the same vein, I think is going to happen, right? Like I want to make sure that I'm a big force behind this, but it's going to happen with or without me. So I think that's the big grandiose things of that happens. I think it'll be for us, that discussion that we are having, which is like, what's truth, is going to become more murkier and murkier. We think right now, the social media is tough. We do fact checking. I feel like best of luck to us, because what I was amazed at, the amount of digital content digital entities are creating AI agents is like far, far greater rate at which than human beings are creating content.
I mean, it's actually a problem for the model builders, for the LLM builders. It's like, it's become a thing to make sure that something's actually human authored.
I mean, that's what the
all of it is. So awesome. Well, I think this was a great chat. Thanks so much.
That's all for this episode. I'm Dhillon, your host, saying check back soon for your next AI injection. In the meantime, if you need help injecting AI into your business or project, reach out to us at xionyx.com. That's XYONIX.com. Whether it's text, audio, video, or other business data, we help all kinds of organizations like yours automatically find and operationalize transformative insight.